Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been doing a series of webinars now for about a year and a half, and this is number 227. We do have guests lined up going forward in through August. And, you know, every time I turn around, I find another topic to talk about because something happens or somebody tells me something. So if you have a topic you would like me to have as a guest, please let me know. Just pop me an email at wendy@wendymurdoch.com, or you can go to the website Murdoch Method and just put it in there's a contact form. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get an email every Sunday with the guests coming in the next week, and that's at murdochmethod.com. Today, my guest is Danielle Santos, and I met Danielle, when did we meet? I'm trying to remember now, 10 years ago?
Long time ago.
Yeah.
At a Pony Club meeting.
That's right.
In Portland, right. Oregon.
Yeah. And so we've stayed in touch, and she's done some Surefoot stuff with me, which has been really fun with her horses. Maybe she'll mention that while we talk. But she
and some lessons.
Yes, and some lessons. True. And she is here today to talk to us about helmets and helmet safety and why it's so important to protect this thing on the top of your neck. So welcome, Danielle. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for having me. This is exciting for me because, of course, I've always believed in what you're doing with Surefoot, and having had you as an instructor, I also believe in how you do with the Murdoch method. I think it's fantastic.
Thank you so much. So Danielle, just give us your background. Like I don't even know how long you've been involved with horses all your life, or what's your story?
So I've always been a horse lover / rider. But after working downtown DC for several years, I was able to get a lucky break and start working at a tax store. We were in transition, my spouse and I, and it was a great time, and I started doing buying, and then I haven't left since. The husband is now an ex-husband, and I have, traveled and done different things and had, a wonderful person by my side since. But, it's been now, I think, 23 years that I've been in equestrian retail, and I love it. So,
wow. That's really impressive. So you worked for a tack shop, and then you started, was it then that you went to Charles Owens?
I did. I went to Charles Owen in 2010, and they recruited me to do some marketing for them. And it was just a normal situation where I kind of evolved into taking on the global marketing. And I did that until the end of 2019, when I took on the US sales. So I now am the VP of the US and Canadian sales.
Wow. Okay. So I have a Charles Owens helmet, and this is not about promoting a particular product, but it's really about why wearing helmets, regardless of the brand at this point, why wearing a helmet is so important. So I would think that with all of your marketing expertise and your experience in the tack shops and everything, that there's been a lot of development, improvement, research, and information coming forward about head injuries that's really important for us to understand as equestrians.
Right, there definitely is. And we always say that the most important thing, the most important part of being safe is making sure your helmet fits. So your helmet, and this is kind of the precursor to everything we do, your helmet can have all the bells and whistles and all the safety standards and have the most innovative safety mechanisms installed in it. And if it doesn't fit, it won't stay in place or it won't stay on. And that doesn't do you any good. So the first and paramount thing is to get a helmet to fit right.
And that makes me think of some pretty horrific stories that I can remember where, a child was wearing a helmet, but it snapped back and broke her neck because obviously it didn't fit properly. So like any piece of equipment, fit is super important for it to do its job, whether that's a saddle, whether that's your boots, whether that's a bridle, whether that's your helmet. So tell us about proper helmet fit.
So there are a few steps to helmet fit, and the best thing is to go to a retailer. A brick and mortar retailer is always best to be fitted in person. But if you're in a location where you're not able to go to a store, or, you know, after COVID, now we kind of almost have to say, or if your store is not open, you know, for you to come in and have a fitting, you know, there are places on the internet that you can get some information. I do have a couple of handouts that I can pass along, but basically, you know, you want to be able to have your helmet, your head measured with centimeters. And so we use a measuring tape on centimeters, and we measure around the head, the circumference of the head, about a finger's width, about 3/4 of an inch above the eyebrow, around the top of the ear, and down over the occipital bone. And so basically that's where the helmet band liner on the interior of your helmet is going to sit. That gives you the best measurement. And most people are somewhere, the most average measurements are 56 or 57 centimeters, which translates to 6 7/8 is a 56, and 57 is a size 7. That kind of keeps you, if you can remember that a 57 is a 7, you can generally kind of extrapolate from there where your size is. And so that gives you the kind of the precision size that you need to have. And that will help when you go to have your helmet. If you go into a store and you do not get a measuring tape on your head, you can ask for it, you know, because especially with our brand, and I'm fairly certain with every other brand, they're putting this measuring tape on your head to find your right head shape, head measurement. And then we go to head shapes, which gets a lot more complicated.
Yeah. So let's talk about measurement for a second. You know, I'm just thinking of all the people that buy a helmet off the internet, never measure their head, and don't think about that level of fit. I mean, just right out of the door, right? And, you know, there's a lot of other sports that wear helmets, lacrosse, football, baseball. And do they measure their head?
Sport? Yeah, well, I believe that they do, but I would wonder if you go into a regular sports shop to buy a helmet for your child who may be taking up snowboarding, whether they would. I think if you go to a store that's more specific in their expertise, you probably would get a measurement, but I can't say that for certain. I don't do any other sports but horses.
Yeah, no, I get it. But I'm just wondering, you know, just in general, how important just measuring somebody's head to make sure that the helmet they're being fit with is going to fit, regardless of whatever sport they're doing. There's a lot of sports where you wear helmets now, right? For good reason. You know, you add speed and wheels or something like that, or motors, and you increase the level of force that you're going to hit the ground with. The ground. And so a well-fitting helmet, because I'm just thinking of, you know, how many parents out there have never been educated to proper helmet fit for their activity for their children.
Exactly.
You know, and so this is kind of fascinating to me to even hear about that. And also you just said like a 6 and a 7, 6 and 7/8 and 7 are the most common.
Yes, in the US, that's the most common sizes that we find.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Although Brad, he's got a big head. I'm sure that's not.
And in some areas, you know, it's slightly different. It might be a 7 and a 7 and an 8. Yeah. But generally those 3 sizes, specifically those 2 in the US overall, are the top sizes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about shape, because this is an issue that I've had many times with a helmet. So what are the standard shapes?
So every helmet brand has kind of the perception of how their helmets fit. And generally that comes to the fit model. So as we know in clothing, where your clothes are designed or made kind of give you an indication as to what they're going to fit like. So we're a British brand. And our initial head shape that we've been doing hats and helmets since 1911, starting with military helmets, going into motorcycle helmets. Yeah, we were the first full face guard in the UK. way back. And then we transitioned to riding helmets and velvet hats when someone in the family started taking up riding. And she's no longer riding. She's actually Roy Burek's sister. And I think it's interesting for her, you know, when she took up riding, her father, who was managing the company at the time, decided to make her and her friends proper velvet hats with a little bit more safety in them. So Charles Owen was actually Roy Burek's grandfather, and now Roy Burek's son has taken over the company, Owen, and is managing everything for us, which is fantastic. But essentially, being British has made our head shapes. Our fit model is a Caucasian head. So we have a tendency to have more what we generally call long oval helmets. And then we have added in a whole new line of round helmets because, of course, with the incidence of SID, sudden infant death syndrome, in the 90s, we started to see more kids born after 92. I think the ruling or the suggestion by the medical associations came in 94. So certainly after 1994, we were putting all of our babies on their backs, which then had a tendency to shape their skull. They have less pronounced occipital bones, and they now have rounder heads than they had before. So prior to that, we all had longer oval head shapes because we laid on our stomach and then on the side of our head.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That is so fascinating.
Yes.
Wow. So, and obviously you fit helmets on other ethnic groups, right? And do you see different head shapes there? Like, because Asia is becoming a very big riding population, right?
Yes. And which is fantastic for a lot of our brands, because some of the brands that you see in stores are actually developed in Asia. So there's the ability, and I think that that's the wonderful thing is, and it's the same thing in clothes. We can fit everybody because we have different fit models depending on where your brand comes from. So whereas we have to work a little harder to fit rounder shapes, a company there's a very popular company that is based in Korea, they make rounder head shapes naturally. So, you know, they would have to make a long oval to make it work, you know? So I think that that's the beauty of it, because we don't all have the same head shape. And I don't know if you know this, but I have seen one of those old fashioned head measurement tools.
Oh yeah, they're so cool.
They're very cool. But I've also been told in the past that there was some sort of measurement of a head that gave you an idea of a person.
I think it's called phrenology. I don't quote it, but the study of someone's head shape would tell you about his intelligence and all this kind of stuff. It's old stuff, but I've seen one of those head fitting, in fact, because I have two Western hats, and I got there from Montana. And so I was at a show or something, and I think they had it there. It was really interesting. It looks like a whole bunch of pins that you head, and then it measures your head.
Yes. There's one, an antique here in one of our stores in Middleburg, Virginia, and you know, who's been doing this for years and years and years. And they have one, and it's very cool. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you've ever seen those the silver pin things that you put your hand on and stuff, it's kind of that idea, right?
Yeah.
It takes the shape. So that's really cool. So then, like I'm an oval, and I'm thinking about my helmets throughout my equestrian career. And I started out with the, hard shell velvet helmet, no chin strap whatsoever. And then the adaptation of a chin strap, which went over it, right? Mm-hmm. And then into a helmet that was still that same kind of just hard shell, but with a built-in chin strap. And
that was clear?
No, it wasn't clear. I didn't have the clear one. I had the skin tone one, but then the clears came in. And then there was, of course, the skull cap from the jockeys. You know, if you were eventing, you had that so you could put your cover on with your colors. So there's, even in, my lifetime, there's been an enormous evolution of helmets. Now they're, right, high tech with high tech materials and, better fit. I mean, back then you had like two shapes. Well, no, you had one shape, I guess,
Yes. But because of the way that they were made, a lot of hats in that type of production, they were either shellacked cardboard.
Oh, really?
Yes. The old-fashioned patties, they were shellacked cardboard. And so they would mold and shape to your head as your head heat up. And then, of course, prior to that, in all the old jockey skulls, they used cork. Cork was an original sort of, we talk about the EPS liner, which is kind of an expanded polystyrene, a styrofoam of sorts. And it was cork before that. And we did a lot of cork helmets. And that's what the jockeys wore inside their helmets. And the motorcycle helmets as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
But things have evolved a lot. We have a lot more high-tech materials. So, and there's been an awful lot of emphasis about head injuries and that sort of thing in the pro football players.
Right.
And so how has that affected what's happening, or has the equestrian industry been on a separate track looking at head injuries, or, what's happening there in terms of head injuries and knowledge, information? And
I think, like everything else, the fact that, obviously the movie Concussion and this CTE phenomenon has really heightened everybody's awareness to concussion. And at the same time, we have our kids who are having concussions, what appears to be more of an incidence of concussions, or maybe we're just noticing it in their high school sports. And then, of course, girls soccer was, I don't know if it still is, but it was a few years ago, had the highest incidence of concussion of all high school sports because of the way, because girls don't have the same strength in their necks. So then they take the impact more in their head, whereas a boy would have the strength in their neck. When you're talking about falling, you always see these great action shots of girls soccer where, they're being celebrated for being so strong and independent, and yet they're hitting the ground in a way that they're having brain shear.
Wow.
So I think all of the sports have created this incredible awareness of the fact that our brain is our most important feature. It's what makes us us.
Yeah.
And I think all of the sports are kind of running parallel and utilizing different information from each other. The NFL certainly has put their money towards it, for sure, doing the grants, which Charles Owen was involved in, and ended up that the group we were working with and Roy Burek was leading the team at Cardiff University, ended up winning for a new sort of origami type interior, protective interior, different than EPS. But looking at sports, looking at the NFL, there's the concussion situation is different. So whereas we as riders, when we fall off, we generally have a single impact, generally. A lot of times you have a horse who could rear up, hit you in the front of the face, and then you fall and you hit the back of your head potentially on the side of an arena. And that is a pretty catastrophic injury, because you have two impacts.
Yeah.
Polo, for instance, polo has multiple impacts, which is why they just adopted the NOCSI standard as being a requirement, because NOCSI is a standard like we have ASTM, and it gets certified by SEI. NOCSI is for multi-impact. That's what the NFL uses. So
what does NOCSI stand for?
Oh,
sorry,
you got me on that one. I know, I actually don't know. I'll have to look that up and send it to you.
Okay, great.
But they're based in Tennessee, and that's what they focus on, is this multi-impact. Because in football, American football, these guys are having up to 50 subconcussive impacts per game. Subconcussive impacts, become cumulative, which is how the CTE ends up happening, because you could get knocked out or knocked down. We'll use that, knocked down, hit in the head, and you might not feel it. You know, we always talk about, oh, it rang my bell, or I saw stars, all these little sayings that we've used in the past. We may not feel it, but your head has had a change, an impact to it. So what we end up having is this cumulative effect, which then changes how our brain is dealing. And while I'm not a neuroscientist and I'm not a brain surgeon in any way, we can now look at it as laymen and say, I don't want that. I don't want to have, I want to have as much protection as possible and still enjoy my sport. But we now have products that can do that. Whereas even 10 years ago, we didn't have that like we do now. The innovations are extraordinary. We're using information from other sports. Our new polo helmet, which is a NOXI standard per the requirement, is from other sports. So we're able to cross over a little bit more. Even though equestrianism, the falls, the impacts are slightly different and sometimes more dangerous.
So, okay, let's just kind of define some terms here. CTE stands for?
Oh, you got me on that one again. I'm blanking on it. Geez, Wendy, you got me twice.
I'm sorry. If somebody out there wants to Google it real quick and let us know.
I say it all the time and I forget that I, have to remember what it's called.
ASTM.
So that's the American Standards and Testing of Materials.
Okay. So NOXI and ASTM are basically, if you will, independent laboratory tested standards for safety for helmets.
And SEI, which is based in McLean, Virginia, is the body that independently tests for those two here in the US.
Great. So basically, helmets that are tested by SEI, okay, that are rated, that pass, have
and it's only a pass-fail, and that's kind of come under fire recently. And I think that that's a really important piece. This independent testing by SEI, we've always kind of celebrated that because it's independent. It's completely unbiased. You have to send your helmets in at your cost and they test them and then they give it a pass or fail.
Okay.
So you have some helmets who pass who are up here and some helmets who just
barely
get through. So that's what, I don't know if you've heard about Virginia Tech and what the work that they're doing with their 5-star rating. In other sports, they do a 5-star rating. They have an incredible lab. And that's it. I've wanted to go and visit it, but they have testing where they start to rate, like kind of like Consumer Reports, where they can say to us as a group, as a community, this helmet brand in this helmet style is far surpassing this helmet in this helmet style. And they can give that rating, kind of like what they do in Sweden with the Folksam insurance company, who's done a report. And actually they just came out on Friday. And I was called by a colleague in the UK. They just released the information that their 2021 report, their first one was in 2028, was released, and they give ratings up to 5. So 5 is the best rating. And they take products that are more popular in the area, in the country. And I think that that's a really important development, not just the innovations of our products, but also we have people who are wanting to test these differently and tell us what's better for us.
So other helmets not in the equestrian industry have had this 5-star rating?
Yes, I believe they have worked, well, certainly they've worked with football. I have heard that they've done polo in the past, but now our polo helmets are different with the NOC standard. They've done hockey. And,
oh, yeah, that's another sport with high head injury.
Right, right. And I believe they've also done cycling. So, you know, this is something that's not new to them. Having the testing and getting the standard and testing to that standard is one thing, but getting the standard and then taking a whole cross section of products and running them all through the test and saying, this one barely passes, this one far exceeds the testing. I think that that's important because you might have a product that you're going back and forth with. And you say, well, they both fit me, but which one do I want to do?
Right.
And having that information from another independent group is valuable.
And the independence is really important because, you know, we all know that everybody who makes a product is going to think their product is the best. Mm-hmm. It may be the best,
right?
But without the independent testing,
right?
You know, I mean, I can think of so many things where people have said this is a great product and it'll do this and this and this, but there's, you know, no testing behind it, so you can't evaluate. All we can do is take supplements, for example.
Right. Right. It's like being peer reviewed. When you write a paper, you're a researcher, a PhD student, you do a report and it's, you know, valuable. It has valuable information, but until it's peer reviewed, you don't have anybody who's actually kind of proving what you've said.
Right.
And I think that that's really important.
Yep. So we've seen a lot of innovations, like even in, like you say, in the past 10 years, and the testing is coming up, which is going to help give us as a consumer a better way to evaluate the helmet that we're looking at, not just by its fit, but also by its rating.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then
it's also important to note that here in the US, we have the ASTM standard, and I do have kind of a nice little wheel of information.
Oh.
It's a little bit hard to understand without looking at it. So this is ASTM.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the icons are each tests.
Right.
So up here is the British standard. It has 4 different tests. And I could go through what the tests are, or I could send it off to you. So ASTM has 2.
Oh, wow.
And their 2 is on a flat surface and on an edge surface. What the British do is they test for both of those in addition to crush and in addition to spike. So a spike would be generally a horse's stud. You know, so if you're eventing or show jumping and you wear studs, there are other horse sports that do wear studs. You know, sometimes you may have an impact of a rock if you're out trail riding and you fall on a very sharp rock. So lots of different situations. The crush is if your horse falls on you.
Yeah. So this is really interesting because, again, I didn't understand. What's the one down in the bottom right there that has even more icons?
That's Snell. So Snell is historically a motorcycle helmet standard. And what we've adopted Snell in equestrian sports is for rotational falls and eventing. It has a much higher, it has 1,000 newtons of crush protection. So if your horse falls on your head, your helmet that has Snell will protect you more than something that is just an ASTM helmet.
Okay, so just read to us what each icon means.
So do you want me to hold it up as well?
No, because we can't really see it, but if you can see what each one is.
And I'll tell you which ones do it. So there's one test that does a flat surface test that's 1.8 meters above. And the ASTM, the VG1, which is a European standard, or sorry, a European specification, it's not harmonized yet, very long story, but VG1 is currently what Europe is using.
Okay.
And also the UK. And In the Snell, it's 1.9 meters. So that's generally a full-size horse where you would be falling.
So falling from a height.
Falling from a height.
Onto a flat surface.
Onto a flat surface.
Okay.
Yep. So then the second one that ASTM has is the landing on an edge surface. That would be your, again, a rock, the edge of an arena, you know, the railroad ties, a fence board, a jump. I mean, we can think of all these different things. You know, I've had somebody fall and hit their head on the wheel well of their trailer.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of edge surfaces. So that's from a 1.3 meter height.
Okay.
So ASTM tests for that. The British standard tests for that, again, at 1.3, and the European standard does not.
Okay.
And the Snell standard uses 1.3.
Okay.
So that's it for the ASTM tests, which is the
There are other icons on that chart.
Yes. So the spike test that I spoke of earlier from the British is 75 centimeters. So that's 75 centimeters into your helmet. So we use,
that's a lot, isn't it?
It is a lot. I think it's a lot, but 75 centimeters would probably be replicating the force at which it's being driven into your, so if you have a stud that's 3/4 of an inch, I would assume that 75 centimeters is taking into account the force.
Okay, yeah.
Not a scientist,
right?
Just having information.
How that works, but anyway, a spike impact.
Spike impact.
A stud, like a nail, like a small sharp object that's going to penetrate.
That's going to penetrate into the shell of the helmet. So our shells are either fiberglass, which is kind of moldable, or plastic, which is high impact plastic. We didn't have this kind of high impact plastic, I'd say 5-8 years ago. The plastic we have now that comes, you know, it has such an incredible testing potential that it can be tested to that 75 centimeters.
Okay, but we're basically thinking more like a puncture wound.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So that 75 centimeters is also a test in the European, but it's 50 centimeters.
Okay.
So an inch less.
Not as much force.
Right.
Okay.
And then of course, Snell has 100 centimeters. So Snell's kind of like the best of the best, right?
But their motorcycle helmets, I remember that name from way back when.
Yes.
And
there are helmet brands who do carry Snell. So we have our 4-star, and Champion has a Snell helmet. So you have a choice if you want Snell.
And again, that's a standard, not a brand.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And what else does Snell test for?
There's the crush that the British do. So the British do 4 tests,
right?
Or 4, they have 4 icons, and that's 800 Newtons of force in a crush test. In Europe, they have 630 Newtons. So slightly less.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Snell, it's 1,000 Newtons. And I'm not sure what a horse would be if he was galloping, but certainly if you have a horse galloping at speed, jumping a jump, the physics would tell me I would want 1,000 if the horse is going to land on my head.
Well, and you know, what we have to realize is this is always a catastrophic event.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's the thing, is that the helmet is not designed for the non-catastrophic event. It's designed
not yet
for the catastrophic event, for the time that the horse does a rotational fall, or for the time that your horse hits the road, which happened to me, and you know, spills sideways and you smash your head on the asphalt, or the time where the horse rolls over you, which has happened to me. You know,
oh wow!
It didn't roll over my head. He punched my femur through my hip socket. That was another thing. There's no protection down there from a helmet. But you know, that's what we have to realize, is the helmet is not designed for just, or shouldn't be, for just looking pretty. It's designed for a catastrophic event. And when those occur, hopefully they're rare, right? And you want to survive. That's the intent.
Right. And you've just picked up on something that's really key to choosing a helmet. So what we have done in the past, I'd say 25 years very well, is design better helmets for that catastrophic event and give people options in fit, in look, in safety, you know, because you can choose a regular, and I know mostly about our brand, so you can choose a regular Pro 2 Plus jockey skull to go eventing or to go galloping, you know, on the track. But if you are concerned about a rotational fall, you have the choice of stepping it up to the 4-star helmet, which has all 4 standards, including the Snell, which will protect you if you are jumping a table out on the cross-country course and your horse has a misstep and lands on you. So what this does is it gives people more choice and more fit opportunities. So it's overall the best situation we could have. And, you know, when you're looking at the 3 international standards, the US, the British, and the Europeans, they have all tested to what is important at the time. ASTM is looking to update their standards. So that they're not necessarily currently wanting to just stay the status quo. They're wanting to look at it. And there are studies, I think the University of Kentucky has PhD students looking at it. So we are looking as an industry, as a safety industry, at upping the ante. So I think that that's really important because the Snell then has a 5th test, which is a rounded edge.
Oh.
So like a half moon. And they drop the helmet from 1.5 meters. So I think if people can know this and say, okay, I want to have protection against the catastrophic, you know, I don't want to, you know, if you were at all in the situation where we were looking at requiring helmets for most of the disciplines in the US back in the mid 2000s, the conversation was, I don't want to be in a hospital and have my children or my siblings or my spouse have to take care of me because I've chosen to ride. So a lot of people chose to wear helmets for that very reason. And now we've kind of got that covered, and we've got it covered with a wide array of types of helmets. But then for additional protection, you've got Mips, which is multi-directional impact protection system, which is a liner that goes into the helmet, and it's used in all kinds of sports at this point, which reduces the incidence of concussion. So
okay, multi-directional, the acronyms in this industry are like,
yes.
So, oh, okay, great. Somebody put that chart up in the chat. Great.
Thank you, Danielle.
So say what Mips is again.
Multi-directional impact protection system.
Okay, and this is in not just riding helmets, but it's in
all sports. So you have it in skiing, you have it in snowboarding, you have it in motorcycles, you have it in cycling. You have it in, I'm missing one very important sport, but basically what it does is it works. So if you're going at speed, you know, we talk about lawn darting, you know, when you fall off your horse, but generally our impacts are at an angle, right? So kind of around 45 degrees to the ground. And what it does is, so this is a Mips helmet. I'm going to take out the liner. So it's the yellow. Mips is always yellow.
Okay.
So it was developed in Sweden to minimize the forces. So when you're walking, let's say you're walking on concrete and you trip and you fall, your head has a natural mechanism of protection. Our skin, our scalp, goes about 5 millimeters across our skull. So what that does is if you're walking along the concrete and you trip and you fall, chances are you're going to get kind of the road rash, the scrape. It's not like dropping a pencil with the eraser and it hits right on the eraser and all that impact is and force is in one particular place, or the jelly side down on your piece of bread. So what you have is you have the ability to extend this 5 millimeters, which takes it from being a head injury, like a traumatic brain injury, to being a scrape. I mean, that's kind of an exaggeration, but it gives you an idea of how important it can be. And we have that now in riding. So it extends it to 10 to 15 millimeters. So your Mips liner will allow your headband to move. So this is my sample. So it moves a little bit more than,
right.
You know, it. So you're going to have your helmet work with your scalp. And we have that in helmets already in a very small way, but this is 10 to 15 millimeters of coverage or of additional movement.
So in other words, because it moves, you get a dissipation of force, and our skin moves a certain amount, but this increases the amount to dissipate more force.
Yes. So when you put on a helmet, and I always bring my aerate when I do this. I'm going to show you, because everybody knows what we look for in a helmet fit. So this is my personal helmet. So I have my helmet on. So what do we do when we test for fit? We go up and down, and you can see my eyebrows moving up and down, right?
Yep.
Sorry, I'll go a little. It's hard to do it on yourself. So we're used to testing that, and we see our eyebrows going up and down. And if that's the case, we feel like it fits, right? Or the person who's helping you in the shop feels like it fits. So what the Mips does is it takes that and extends it. So
wow.
your headband and your helmet has always been part of the safety. It grips your scalp and holds the helmet in place so that it can work with the movement of your scalp. Mips extends that to 10 to 15 millimeters.
That's so cool. You know, I know that there's, there's a lot more technology that's going into this. And it's sad that people have to have injuries that we discount for a while till we finally figure it out in order to move technology. But that's what happens.
But doesn't that happen in regular life? How many times have we said, how many accidents does it take to put up a stoplight?
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm not saying, it's just the way we operate, right?
Right.
And, there was so much traumatic brain injury with people in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. In fact, I was sitting next to a guy on a plane recently, and he showed me pictures of how his Humvee had been blown up. And he was lucky to be alive. But, so I think that because of all that we started to really look at it. And it's really, the past 20 years, I think the evolution of looking at this has been gaining speed, because not only are we recognizing the initial injury, but we're recognizing the long-term compounding of head injuries and how that affects somebody. So can you talk a little bit about sort of, the repeat head injuries and why that's not a good thing?
So we've talked about in the past in terms of the catastrophic, boys have a kind of a second impact syndrome. So that's your high school student that has had a head injury on the field 2 days ago, and he gets back on the field and he has a secondary impact. And unfortunately, it's fatal. It's the worst situation. We've heard that in the past, 10, 20 years, where we've had a promising student who that happens to, which is why they've instituted these 2-week sitting out, or they send kids that are involved in high school sports, and it doesn't matter the high school sport, to concussion centers to have them have some PT, to have therapy to get back to normal, which is why impact testing, which is that test that they give you before you start a sport, and a lot of eventers have taken it through USEA. So that's what they're judging it on. Basically, we look at how those, now of course I've lost my train of thought as I took a breath.
Just multiple impacts and the time in which they have to sit out.
So, and it's very, very, there's so much I can say. We're probably going to run over time, but the multiple impact, we see somebody who has maybe exercised racehorses all through their teenage and 20 some odd years. And they have a little bit of a different sort of interesting personality. And these subconcussive impacts, which they're just now seeing as part of a jockey situation, a racing industry issue, that they are cumulative and they start to affect how our mental health, our potential for getting dementia at an earlier age. It has so many implications that we want to fix it before it happens. You know, you're talking about the military. You know, the PTSD that some of our soldiers have are directly related to these injuries that they've occurred. Maybe they didn't immediately have something that was bleeding, but the vibrations, the impact of these bombs that go off, they're having impact on their brains.
Right.
So I can't speak to more about that because that's not my area of expertise. But when you look at riders, we're looking at, as a group, first of all, the British racing industry during COVID, because these guys have lots of head injuries and it's usually minimal but cumulative impacts. They had, I believe, 3 in succession, could have been 4, jockeys that committed suicide at the beginning of COVID because they were isolated and their world had revolved around racing. So they were always in front of somebody. So they always had positive influences. But then you take this person who has had multiple concussions and you put them in their apartment and you lock them in because of COVID, their mental health doesn't do well. So when I say that, mental health is directly related to our head injuries. It's directly related to concussion. There is a study out there that is saying that we're going to have more and more people as we grow older in nursing homes needing assisted living care, dementia care, because we're more focused on our sport and our head injuries are growing because we're very much a sports oriented nation.
Well, and you know, what you see is little kids that are now, instead of having fun and doing different things, they're being channeled into specific sports early. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, we could go on a long debate.
And they're excelling earlier.
Yes, they're higher impacts, they're harder fit, you know, the fitness levels and everything.
Right.
But the cumulative is the thing that I think that people may not necessarily understand, is that if you, like you said, if you've had a head injury and then another one very shortly after, that is way, way worse than a head injury and 2 years later, a head injury.
Right.
Right. Because the brain hasn't recovered from the first one and bam, you've hit it again.
Exactly.
And so, you know, you think about people who are starting young horses and, oh, I got bucked off and, oh, I got bucked off and, oh, I got bucked off. And it's like, what did you hit?
Right. And it's, you know, for women, and because, you know, the equestrian sport in the US is so strongly female. Right. The other part of it, which is, it always pains me to say that the reason women, or I'm surmising as a layman in brain studies, that because it's only boys who have that second impact syndrome, it's not girls, it's the boys. Mm. And I know from studies that we've done, studies that I've read that Roy Burek did, we have found that female hormones are neuroprotective. Just like hydration is neuroprotective. If you're hydrated, you have a greater likelihood to not have a worse concussion. So when we're dehydrated, so I guess I should say it backwards. When we're dehydrated, we have an increased potential for head injury.
Wow.
Which
Yeah, because there's so
plays into jockeys
in a fluid sac, basically, right?
Yes.
And that fluid is, hydrostatic, so it's going to help protect us from things bouncing around. And I think that that's
exactly
people don't realize is, if you hit and you hit again, that's two. That's not one, that's two.
Right. And just like hydration is key to recovering from concussion.
Right.
So with our female hormones being neuroprotective, once women go through menopause, they don't stop riding, but they still fall. So you see when these studies come out of sport, and especially equestrian sport, that there is a greater incidence for concussions in females above the age of 50. They don't take into account menopause, and you no longer have the female hormones coursing through your body that is neuroprotective. So you see worse head injury in women who are older and are still competing. And, I think that is a key factor for us. And I'm not just saying that because of my age group, but I've seen it with my friends, who have gone through menopause and they had the same fall that they had 5 years ago, and it's horrible for them. And to recover, and the effects are worse because they don't have the female hormones.
Well, this is really fascinating because what I find, as a riding instructor, what I find very commonly is that older women have more fear issues. But if they've lost their neuroprotective hormones that take care of them, of course they're going to have more fear issues.
And who knows if there's a mental component to it.
Well, and that's just, this is just fascinating because all these webinars always lead to more questions.
Right. And isn't that the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's really, really fascinating.
And I'm assuming you're saying, is it the chicken or the egg? Are they afraid because there's something that's changed in their physiological makeup that makes them go, oh, if I fall, maybe I should drop down? Because you see so many women who they decide to do different horse sports. They maybe go from doing the hunters to doing dressage, or they go from eventing to working equitation, so to still enjoy the horses. But that's why helmets and, using safety to your benefit so you can keep doing what you love, because that's what I'm about.
That's the thing about the nervous system. It's really smart, and it knows when we are safe and it knows when we aren't, no matter what our frontal lobe tries to tell us. Oh, I'm fine. No, you're not fine. Right. There is I work with this all the time. The body knows.
With Surefoot.
Yeah. You can't fool the nervous system into believing you're safe when you're not safe. You can do stupid things because you're not safe that your nervous system said don't do, and you do it anyway because you didn't listen. That's another story. But there is that wisdom and intelligence in our body that is trying to keep us safe, even when our intellect wants to override that, or that much more primitive intelligence, which anytime anybody's had a really bad injury like me, you learn to listen to that a whole lot better, because you didn't listen to it, and that's why you got hurt.
And it is fascinating. And I'm going to tell you, we talked about, you said something about Surefoot before, but when I had my horse with EPM, and you and your colleague helped me get him to where he can trail ride, walk, trot, canter again, using Surefoot and using other sorts of building blocks to get him back. Roy and I used to talk about how fascinating it was, because obviously his brain studies had nothing to do with horses and their nervous system, but some of the information was vital for him to learn, because it helped him start to ask the questions with humans and developing better and more innovative safety for us. So that whole proprioception, the Mips liners, it's all interconnected for me, having seen a horse with that, and then having him recover with the help of things like Surefoot. And now I'm even more fascinated with the brain of humans and riding helmets because of it.
Oh, cool. That's
yeah.
Really cool. And that is that whole, you know, the Surefoot pads give horses a sense of safety and grounding.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And, you know, what I tell my older riders is, and this is something else, maybe we can have another webinar and talk about safety vests and air vests.
I was just thinking safety vests ground people and give them a level of comfort that they had never felt before.
Right, because the nervous system now feels the protection that
Mm-hmm.
that vest supplies. And it's the same thing with a helmet. You know, I do want to mention that I've seen so often when people are ridiculed for wearing a helmet because they see that as that they don't have enough riding skill to not need it. But I think that this is such a disservice to you know, for me, that's like saying, you know, drive your car and jump out of it when you're going 60 miles an hour and you'll be fine anyway. I mean, it's like,
Right.
I've never understood that mentality, but maybe that's because I was injured so young. Like when I was, I think I was 15, I wasn't driving yet. I came off my horse and over a jump and landed on my face and broke 3 teeth and obviously had a concussion because I was knocked out. I did have a helmet on, but you know, in the old days, this is,
it was a hunt cap.
You know, and the kid had to get me back on my horse, ride us to a telephone, call my mother, have her drive a half an hour to pick me up, take me to the hospital. Right. So, you know, that was, so I had injuries really early on and have always, and have had more than one, of course. Right. And so that's been really important for me, but I just think it's so important not to listen to someone when your safety is concerned. Like if it's my sense of safety that I need to check with myself and say, I wear a helmet because I want to take care of me. I am important enough to take care of me. And the price of the helmet is irrelevant to the cost of the injury.
Right.
Right. Like you cannot put a price on saving your life.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I think is so important for people. And yeah, the bling is really nice. And if it has stars and bells and whistles, that's great. But you know, we really have to get practical about things like helmets. Is this going to protect my head to the best of its ability so that I can survive the catastrophic? And you know, we never plan for the catastrophic. It's not like we go out and go, I'm going to have a catastrophic injury today. That's not how we do this.
Here, let me dress up so that I can protect myself because I know today I'm going to fall.
Right. It's so often, you know, it's the close to home. It's just like car accidents. It's the close to home. It's the when you know, switched off because you were hypoglycemic. It's the, you know, the car that came past you. It's never something that we plan for, but in terms of getting hurt, but we must plan for being safe.
And I think that's the most important thing here is I've always said, and I've said it for probably about 8 years now with customers, if you are wearing something that you feel good in, it fits you, it gives you a level of confidence that's based on safety. So we can enjoy our sport. We love horses. I mean, the reason that all of your panelists are here and connected to you is because we love horses and we gravitate towards learning more about horses and learning more about what we can do to enjoy our horses. So if putting on a helmet or going and finding the right fit of your helmet allows you to enjoy your horse longer or for more days in a row, that's how I see it. You know, I don't put on a helmet because I'm afraid so much as I want to enjoy my horse. And I also need to work tomorrow to enjoy my family. Right. So, you know, I've started to think of it in that sense. You know, most of us have another job. Not so many of us are lucky enough to have jobs within horses. So if you are an accountant and you decide you want to ride on your lunch hour, you have a big meeting at 4 o'clock. putting on that helmet, and you get paid enough to be able to pay your mortgage and send your kid to school, being able to put on that helmet and have a fall that you can walk away from, and you can get to your meeting and be coherent and be contributing so that you can keep getting your paycheck that pays for your family. I don't want to be silly, but it's a no-brainer to me.
It is a no-brainer. You know, and that's like I wear ball caps a lot. So putting on a different hat is not, you know, it's just a different hat, right? I wear hats for sun protection because then my dermatologist doesn't have to burn crap off my ears. You know,
right.
There's so many reasons that we wear hats. And you know, there's an industry that I wanted to bring up because I think that they're such a model, and that's NASCAR.
Right.
NASCAR now, I mean, Brad loves NASCAR, so I've learned to watch NASCAR. It typically puts me to sleep, but that's fine. I get a nap. But that these guys, they have designed the cars so that these guys can walk away from some of the most horrific accidents where the car flips over and rams into the wall and everything. And they unflip their AC and they climb out of that window and they can stand there and the crowd cheers at them because of all the safety built in so that they can go 200 miles an hour.
Right. And have a rush and enjoy it.
Right. And so, you know, that's another industry that I think is at the forefront of, look at how that industry is actually affecting the safety of our vehicles so that we can go down the road. So, you know, this model for safety is something that I've, you know, because of my injuries and my accidents have been aware of for a very long time. And it's the thing, that you brought up, like with Surefoot, it's about safety. It's about the horse being safe, about the person being safe doing Surefoot, that when we take the emphasis on safety, we make better decisions.
Yes.
We can make decisions that are going to still have speed and they're still going to have excitement and fun, but we're making good decisions so that we're putting the odds in our favor to be able to come back and do it again the next day.
Exactly. So true. So true.
Yeah.
Because that's what we all want to do. We all want to get to the weekend so that we can enjoy our horse for the whole day.
Yep. Yep. And somebody says, I agree. It's common sense to protect and wear a helmet. Absolutely.
Yes.
So, so Danielle, we've come to the end of our hour. It flies by, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Once you start talking, it certainly is. It's so much fun. And I love being able to talk to you anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're going to have you come back and talk about vests, because vests have gone through a massive change. And I'm at the point now when I have an anxious adult rider, I'm like, get a vest. But I know that there's a lot of variations. So let's plan on having you come
and
back.
There's more innovation to come in vests because of, you know, the fact that the USHJA and USEF are looking at it as an option, because you're seeing more air vests at the hunters and the jumper shows.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. About 50%. I think that there was they did a survey, USHJA did a survey, and about 50% of riders are wearing some version of body protection, whether that's a typical body protector that eventers wear or an air vest alone. And so at this particular moment, it's a turning point. It's kind of like where we were in the mid 2000s with helmets.
Yeah.
So we're going to be able to see more and better and more comfortable safety vests in the future. Yeah. I think.
I was just doing a clinic where the air vest arrived after the woman left for the horse show and she got injured.
Oh no. Oh,
yeah.
No.
So, you know, it's like, it's important. We need to plan for it. We need to start taking our sport more seriously in terms of our health. And I think
absolutely
enjoy it for longer and feel better about it.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, I'll leave you on this note. I was talking to a colleague where we kind of looked at different riders, and there are 2 or 3 different types of riders. There are riders who want safety products because they want to continue and enjoy and do more, you know, whether they're going to jump higher or they're going to go faster or they're going to get a young horse. They want to keep doing it and they want to push the envelope and enjoy themselves. And then there's the rider who's a little bit afraid and needs a boost of confidence to know that they're not going to get hurt. And between those 2 people, you know, there's lots of options.
Yes.
There's lots of options in fit, in look, in style, and price point. And we just have to keep pushing the envelope in innovation to make sure that people will always have that much choice and more so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great.
Thank you.
It's been too long. So this is really fun. I'm glad you decided to come on the show.
Thanks, Wendy.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And just remember, you can find this and all of the 226 webinars on the Surefoot Equine YouTube channel. We also have Wendy's Winnies on iTunes, where we take the audio from the webinars and post them. We have not caught up to 226, but Alex puts up about 3 a week. So eventually we will, but that way you can listen to the webinars safely while you're driving your car as a podcast, rather than playing YouTube on your phone as you're driving. All right. So thank you all for tuning in and have a great day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.